Fentanyl, a powder cheaper and easier to find than heroin, but far more deadly. In Fresno, it's not just in the hands of addicts. It's seeping into every street corner, every makeshift tent, silently poisoning the minds of those with no place to call home. Those brightly colored pills resembling candies are the perfect disguise that is turning the streets of Fresno into a living nightmare. Number 1. Fresno. From prosperity to crisis. Fresno, a city fondly nicknamed by travelers from far and wide as the most dreamy city in America, or the city of love and longing. For decades, this fertile soil fed the entire nation. Grapes, almonds, citrus, and vegetables that traveled from these fields to kitchens across America. Migrant laborers came here chasing the promise of steady work, and the low cost of living made it possible for working families to own a small home, raise children, and dream about a better future. But those days feel like another lifetime. Today, Fresno is home to more than 500,000 people, and in many ways, it has become a testing ground. A case study for what happens when a city tries to address homelessness without a systematic plan to expand affordable housing. City officials once reported about 1,400 unhoused residents within Fresno's limits. But by the year 2024, that number, combined with surrounding Fresno and Madera counties, has surged to nearly 4,500 people sleeping on the streets, in cars, or in shelters. That's almost double the count from just 6 years earlier, when an estimated 2,500 were without a home in 2019. The rise hasn't happened in isolation. According to the latest point-in-time count, nearly 1 in 3 of those experiencing homelessness here are women, and hundreds are families with children. Many are veterans, seniors, or individuals living with disabilities, people who never imagined they would lose the roof over their heads. And as the tents multiply along highway embankments and in vacant lots, the cost of housing keeps climbing. A new report shows that rental prices in Fresno surged at an astonishing pace in 2022. According to real estate website Zumper, the median rent for a one-bedroom apartment in Fresno reached $1,540, up 40% from the same period last year, the largest increase in the nation. Meanwhile, the median rent for a two-bedroom apartment was $1,740, a 21% increase. This gap between the need for housing and the actual supply is the silent force driving more people into the streets. And without bold, sustained investment, the city's crisis is poised to grow worse. Because here in Fresno, homelessness isn't the only battle. On these streets, another enemy has emerged cloaked in bright colors like sugar-coated candies for children. Number 2. Double storm in Fresno. Maybe you've heard the word heroin countless times, and you know how destructive it can be. But have you ever heard of fentanyl? A synthetic opioid originally designed to help cancer patients endure the kind of pain that morphine couldn't touch. It is 50 to 100 times stronger than morphine, a medicine that in a hospital can mean the difference between agony and relief. But on the streets, that same potency becomes a lethal gamble. In the illegal drug market, fentanyl has eclipsed heroin. It's cheaper to produce, easier to transport, and so powerful that even a few grains smaller than the tip of a pencil can stop a heartbeat. Its high is intense but brief, pushing users to chase another dose far sooner than they would with heroin. That cycle has made fentanyl the dominant drug in much of California, and Fresno is no exception. The danger isn't theoretical. On a Monday morning, Fresno police received a 911 call. 3 men found unconscious in an apartment complex on Van Ness Avenue. First responders rushed them to the Community Regional Medical Center. All were in their 20s or 30s. One never made it out alive. Toxicology reports confirmed what officers already suspected: fentanyl. The other two survived after emergency treatment, but both had been minutes away from joining Fresno's growing list of overdose deaths. Public health officials in Fresno County have repeated the same warning. When you buy drugs on the street, you cannot know what you're truly getting. Pills that look like prescription medication or even colorful candies are often laced with fentanyl, making every dose a potential last. The scale of the crisis is staggering. According to provisional data released by the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, between March 2021 and March 2022, more than 109,000 Americans died from drug overdoses. Fentanyl and other synthetic opioids were linked to over 2/3 of those deaths, a sharp rise from just over half at the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. In Fresno, the fentanyl crisis and the homelessness crisis are intertwined. On the streets where thousands live without shelter, fentanyl offers a temporary escape from pain, cold, and hopelessness. But it also accelerates the downward spiral. People lose what little stability they have, become more vulnerable to violence, illness, and arrest. For some, the drug is the only thing that dulls reality. For others, it is the last thing they will ever take. Number 3. The nightmare from fentanyl. Fentanyl is tightening its grip on Fresno's homeless camps, turning survival into an even deadlier gamble. Roughly half of the city's unhoused population sleeps without any form of shelter. More than 1 in 4 are women. And among them are 400 families with children trying to survive in conditions that test the limits of human endurance. Nights often bring freezing cold in winter or sweltering heat in summer, with little more than thin blankets or tarps to provide protection. The city's behavioral health resources are stretched to the breaking point. As of 2024, the entire county had fewer than 30 detox beds available at any given time. The ratio of licensed addiction counselors to people living with substance use disorders hovers around 1 for every 145, far below what public health experts recommend. Outreach teams report that even when someone is ready to enter treatment, the waiting lists can last weeks or months, during which time the chance of relapse or fatal overdose remains dangerously high. For Housing First or shelter programs, this gap creates an almost insurmountable barrier. People dependent on fentanyl often cannot share safe spaces with others or follow the basic rules that make those spaces functional. Severe physical dependence pushes many to prioritize their next dose over food shelter or medical care, a reality that derails case management plans and long-term support strategies before they even begin. Some shelters have had to turn away clients for safety reasons, leaving them with nowhere to go except back to the streets. Encampments now stretch across the city, from Chinatown's narrow alleys and downtown side streets to the industrial zones near Highway 99. These aren't just temporary shelters cobbled together from tarps and plywood. They are concentrated zones of human suffering, often marked by piles of trash, discarded needles, and an almost complete absence of sanitation. Public health officials warn that these conditions are a breeding ground for infectious disease outbreaks, adding yet another layer to the crisis. For the people living here, each day is a battle against the cold hunger illness and the pull of addiction. For the city, it's a landscape that shows in plain sight how fentanyl and homelessness have become inseparable, and how any solution will have to confront both or risk solving neither. And as the crisis deepens, the line between survival and tragedy grows thinner with every passing day. Number 4. Widespread consequences. The consequences of Fresno's twin crises are becoming impossible to overlook. In the city's emergency rooms, the number of patients treated for overdoses, exposure, and infections climbs steadily with each passing month. Paramedics race through the streets daily, responding to calls of people collapsed on sidewalks, lying unconscious in public restrooms, or slumped inside shop doorways. Many are familiar faces to first responders, revived again and again in a cycle that seems to have no end. Within the homeless encampments, the absence of clean water and sanitation turns minor wounds into life-threatening infections. Public health officials report a rise in hepatitis, skin abscesses, and respiratory illnesses. The spread of disease moves quietly but quickly, compounding the toll already taken by addiction and harsh living conditions. Beyond the health crisis, the city's economic core is feeling the strain. Downtown Fresno, once busy with shoppers and lunch-hour crowds, now shows long stretches of shuttered storefronts. Business owners speak of dwindling foot traffic and customers choosing to avoid streets lined with tents and visible drug use. Each closure erases years of work and investment, and with it, a small piece of the community's economic lifeblood. Efforts to clear encampments offer only brief relief. Within days, tents return to the same sidewalks and vacant lots, rebuilt by people with no alternative. Outreach workers know that without stable housing and treatment options, each sweep simply moves the problem to another block. Meanwhile, the city's social services are overwhelmed. Lengthy intake processes, limited shelter beds, and a shortage of trained staff mean many never receive help. Others, unable to meet program requirements while battling addiction or mental illness, slip out of the system entirely. What remains is a feedback loop that deepens with time. More suffering leads to greater strain on services, which in turn leaves more people without support. Each day that passes without a coordinated, sustained response brings Fresno closer to a point where recovery will demand far more than compassion or enforcement alone. Number 5. Legal policies. Hearing all of this, you might be tempted to say fentanyl is the crime, the root cause of Fresno's entire homelessness crisis. But is that really the case? Is it truly fair to place all the blame on fentanyl for what is happening on Fresno streets? The truth is, fentanyl does not stand alone. New policies, especially enforcement measures, are also shaping the lives of thousands of people without homes. In 2024, a new city ordinance went into effect banning homeless encampments in public spaces. Since then, more than 160 people have been arrested and charged with misdemeanors. Those who refuse shelter or treatment can face up to 1 year in jail or fines of up to $1,000. City officials argue the ordinance has helped clear trash from public areas, reopened parks and sidewalks for community use, and connected more unhoused residents with treatment beds and temporary housing. In some downtown areas, the change has been immediate cleaner streets, safer public events. But for those living through it, the story looks very different. Des Martinez, a longtime homeless rights advocate in Fresno, has watched the crisis deepen despite the crackdowns. Our homelessness here in Fresno is getting worse. It's growing every single day, she said. We are suffering, we are hurting, and we are losing hope. To her, the city's aggressive approach amounts to criminalizing poverty, and punishment cannot replace real solutions. Not all strategies rely on enforcement. Fresno has used state and federal funding to purchase motels and convert them into affordable housing. A significant step for a city that before 2021 did not even have a dedicated housing department. Today, that department has 16 staff members focused on expanding housing stock and managing support programs. Still, progress has been uneven. Advocates point out that in the past year, several affordable housing projects that had already been approved and secured competitive state funding were canceled or suspended. Disputes over zoning bureaucratic delays and shifting budget priorities have left hundreds without the stability they were promised. The impact of these decisions is felt in daily life. At a recent community meeting, a mother explained she was about to become homeless again after months of stability in a county shelter. A lot of us aren't using drugs. A lot of us are really trying, she said, her voice shaking. Where are we supposed to go now? That question remains forever unanswered. Number 6. Is homelessness a choice? Really true? What would be your first reaction if you came across a homeless person lying on the street? Would you look away and hurry past without a word? Or would you think of them as someone to be scorned, believing they've chosen an easy life without responsibility, simply lying on the ground out of laziness? The reality in Fresno is far more complex than those assumptions suggest. Nearly 68% of the city's unhoused residents have at some point tried to access housing services only to be turned away or face barriers they could not overcome. For some, it meant spending months on a waiting list. For others, it meant being asked for identification or proof of income they lost years ago. By the time a bed or an apartment becomes available, the fragile window of opportunity for stability has often closed. Behind these statistics are some of the most vulnerable members of the community. Veterans who once served their country, now sleeping beneath overpasses. Single mothers who cannot keep up with both rent and childcare costs raising children in tents. People with disabilities or chronic illnesses navigating city streets with walkers or wheelchairs cut off from consistent medical care. Each story is different, but they share a common thread. A system unable to catch them before they fell too far. Placing the blame solely on individuals ignores the structural forces that push people into homelessness and keep them there. Skyrocketing housing costs, stagnant wages, the lack of adequate health care and mental health services, and an already thin social safety net. All combine to create an environment where escaping homelessness is nearly impossible. Even those who manage to secure temporary housing often face the same unstable conditions that led them to the streets in the first place. So when you see someone curled up on the sidewalk in Fresno, what remains should not be judgment. There should be an understanding that behind them is a chain of deeper causes: a housing crisis, unemployment, and gaps in healthcare and welfare systems. Each person there is living proof of a system that has allowed far too many to slip beyond society's reach until there is no path left to return. Number 7. National perspective and solutions. We are not here to lay blame entirely on any one person, agency, or policy, but Fresno shows perhaps more clearly than anywhere else that a crisis of this magnitude cannot be solved with stopgap measures alone. What is happening here is not unique. It reflects a pattern seen in countless cities across the United States, where skyrocketing rents, stagnant wages, underfunded mental health services, and the spread of synthetic drugs have combined into a perfect storm. Faced with this reality, many have expressed a wish to turn back the clock and apply something like the Marshall Plan, the massive post-war initiative that rebuilt nations from the ground up. In the context of today's crisis, such a plan would mean more than temporary shelters or small pilot projects. It would mean building tens of thousands of affordable housing units nationwide, expanding access to healthcare and addiction treatment, and addressing the root causes of poverty with the same urgency and coordination once reserved for reconstructing war-torn Europe. This vision is not nostalgia for nostalgia's sake. It is a recognition that only a large-scale, sustained and coordinated effort involving federal, state, and local governments working in concert can reverse the trajectory we are on. It would require stable funding over decades, not just during political cycles, and a willingness to treat housing as a human right, rather than a conditional privilege. Without such commitment, Fresno and cities like it will remain locked in a reactive loop. Clearing camps, watching them reappear, and counting the rising toll in lives lost and futures derailed. A national Marshall Plan, planned for housing, would break that loop, replacing short-term fixes with long-term stability and giving people more than a temporary bed, giving them a real chance to rebuild their lives. Number 8 time to stop and think. The crisis in Fresno is more than a local tragedy. It is a warning to the entire nation, a stark signal of what happens when profit is placed above people. This is not simply a question of charity. It is a matter of social justice. When thousands are left without shelter, when healthcare and addiction treatment become privileges reserved for the few. When dignity itself is rationed, the moral foundations of a society begin to crumble. Across Fresno, shelters that have for years provided a free place to sleep and a safe meal to those with nowhere else to go are now facing the possibility of closing their doors. The reason is painfully simple. The money is running out. For the people who rely on them, these closures would mean more than losing a bed. They would mean losing the one place that offered a moment of safety in an otherwise dangerous and uncertain existence. Without these shelters, the streets already overcrowded and unsafe will become even harsher, pushing people deeper into cycles of illness, addiction, and despair. It is easy to grieve, to criticize, to say that the city should do more or that someone else should fix the problem. But change will not come from words alone. Real change requires action. That action might take many forms, like volunteering time, donating resources, supporting affordable housing projects, advocating for policy reforms, or simply refusing to turn away when confronted with another person's suffering. The truth is, no one can force you to help Fresno's homeless. Choosing to act will always be a personal decision. However, in choosing not to act, we collectively accept this reality as permanent a future where encampments grow unchecked, services collapse under the weight of need, and the line between survival and despair becomes even thinner. Fresno's story is not only about one city's failure or resilience. It is a mirror held up to the nation reflecting the values we prioritize. If we can invest in people with the same urgency, resources, and determination that we invest in profit, then there is still hope. But if we cannot, the warning Fresno offers today will become the lived reality of countless other cities tomorrow. And by then, the cost of rebuilding in dollars and in lives will be far greater than the cost of acting now. Fresno is not a story of inspiration. It is a warning. A dark corner of America where housing has collapsed, services have failed, and the streets are claimed by desperation and fentanyl. This is what happens when people are pushed beyond the margins, when survival replaces any dream of stability. Ignore it here, and it will surface elsewhere. This is not about charity. It is about facing a truth many choose to avoid. If you want more unfiltered looks into the world's hidden crises like this video, and subscribe to NVLKL Travel Documentary.